The rain fell steadily over the city, blurring the glittering skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Carter Manor. Inside the magnificent mansion, every room sparkled with elegance: polished marble floors, priceless paintings, crystal chandeliers, and fresh flowers arranged by the staff that morning. Yet despite all its luxury, the house felt painfully empty. Today was Ethan Carter's 43rd birthday. Only 3 years earlier, Ethan had been one of the country's most admired CEOs. Newspapers called him the golden visionary, the billionaire who transformed failing companies into global successes. His calendar had once overflowed with meetings, charity galas, and invitations from influential people eager to stand beside him. Then everything changed. A devastating car accident left Ethan paralyzed from the waist down. Even worse, his fiancée, Sophia, lost her life in the crash. Overnight, the confident businessman disappeared. Although he continued leading his company from a wheelchair, the cheerful smile that once inspired thousands had faded into quiet loneliness. His assistant had sent elegant birthday invitations weeks ago. Executives, investors, politicians, celebrities, and old friends had all promised they would attend. The grand ballroom had been prepared perfectly. A long dining table overflowed with gourmet dishes. A 5-tier birthday cake stood proudly beneath sparkling lights. Soft classical music drifted through hidden speakers while dozens of wrapped presents waited beside the fireplace. 6 o'clock arrived. No one came. At 6:30, Ethan glanced toward the entrance every few minutes, convincing himself they were simply delayed. By 7, the staff exchanged worried looks but said nothing. At 8, his phone buzzed repeatedly, not with birthday wishes, but with excuses. Urgent business meeting. Family emergency. So sorry, something came up. Some people did not even bother to send a message. Ethan stared silently at the untouched dining table before forcing a tired smile. "I suppose that's enough waiting," he said quietly. His elderly butler, Mr. Heiress, gently rolled Ethan toward the enormous birthday cake. The old man lit a single candle instead of all 43. "You should still make a wish, sir." Ethan looked at the tiny flame dancing in the silence. "I already know wishes don't always come true." With one slow breath, he blew out the candle. The room became completely still. Outside the mansion gates, Daniel Brooks parked his aging delivery van. At 35, Daniel worked long hours delivering groceries to support his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, after losing his wife to illness several years before. Money was always tight, but he never allowed hardship to steal their kindness. As Daniel unloaded the final boxes, Lily spotted colorful balloons through the mansion window. "Daddy," she whispered, "someone's having a birthday." She looked again. "There aren't any cars." Daniel followed her gaze and frowned. "No guests either." Moments later, one of the housekeepers quietly carried untouched trays of food back toward the kitchen. Lily's smile faded. "Is the birthday man all alone?" Daniel hesitated before nodding. "I think he might be." Without another word, Lily carefully opened the small lunchbox she carried. Inside sat a simple chocolate cake they had baked together the night before using the last of their cocoa powder. It had been meant as a surprise dessert after dinner. She looked up at her father with hopeful eyes. "Can we share my cake with him?" Daniel smiled softly. They had very little, yet somehow his daughter was always ready to give. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the little cake, walked to the mansion's front door, and rang the bell. Neither of them realized that this small act of kindness was about to change 3 lives forever. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the silent mansion. Inside, Ethan frowned. At this hour, he expected another delivery or perhaps a staff member finishing their shift. Mr. Heiress, the elderly butler, walked to the entrance and slowly opened the massive oak door. Standing on the porch were a tired-looking man in a worn jacket and a little girl clutching a small chocolate cake decorated with uneven white icing. The words, "Happy Birthday," were written across the top in a child's careful handwriting. Can we see the birthday man?" Lily asked shyly. Mr. Heiress blinked in surprise before smiling warmly. "I believe he'd like that very much." A few moments later, Daniel wheeled Ethan into the entrance hall. Ethan studied the strangers with curiosity. They were clearly not wealthy investors or business associates. Their clothes were simple, and Daniel's delivery van was still parked outside. Lily stepped forward first. "Happy birthday, sir," she said, holding out the cake with both hands. "I made it myself." For several seconds, Ethan couldn't speak. No expensive gift from his former friends had ever touched him the way this small homemade cake did. "Thank you," he finally whispered. "It's beautiful." Daniel scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "My daughter saw the decorations. She thought nobody should spend a birthday alone." Ethan looked at the little girl, then at the cake, and smiled, a real smile that had not appeared on his face in years. "I think she's right." Mr. Heiress insisted they come inside. Soon the four of them sat around the dining table that had been prepared for dozens of guests but now held only a billionaire, a delivery driver, a cheerful child, and an elderly butler. Instead of expensive speeches or formal toasts, the room filled with simple conversation. Lily told Ethan about school, her favorite books, and how she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. Daniel spoke about raising Lily alone after losing his wife, Emma, 4 years earlier. Though life had been difficult, he tried to teach his daughter that kindness was worth more than money. Ethan listened carefully, feeling the warmth of genuine company replacing the cold silence that had haunted the mansion all evening. As dinner ended, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket to pay for the groceries he had accidentally forgotten to invoice. While pulling out his wallet, an old photograph slipped onto the polished floor. Ethan bent forward instinctively. The picture showed Daniel standing beside a smiling young woman with a baby in her arms. The moment Ethan saw her face, his heart skipped a beat. Where did you get this photograph?" he asked quietly. Daniel picked it up. "My wife, Emma," he replied with a sad smile. "She passed away a few years ago." Ethan stared at the photograph, unable to hide his shock. "I knew her." Daniel looked up in disbelief. "You knew Emma?" Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the picture. "Many years ago," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "before I became the man everyone recognized, your wife changed my life in a way she never even realized." Silence settled over the table. Daniel had never heard Emma mention Ethan Carter. What secret had she taken with her to the grave? And why did the powerful CEO suddenly look as though he had just found a missing piece of his own past? Daniel drove home that night with countless questions running through his mind. Ethan Carter's emotional reaction to Emma's photograph had been impossible to ignore. His late wife had always been kind and humble, but she had never once mentioned knowing one of the country's most powerful businessmen. Lily, however, couldn't stop smiling. "Daddy," she said from the back seat, "Mr. Ethan looked happy when we left. I don't think he'll be lonely anymore." Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope you're right." The next morning, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Emma. Memories he had buried for years came rushing back. Long before he became a billionaire, he had been a struggling young entrepreneur whose first company was on the verge of collapse. One rainy afternoon, after a devastating meeting with investors, he had wandered into a small neighborhood cafe. Emma had worked there as a waitress. She noticed the discouraged young man sitting alone and quietly placed a slice of homemade pie in front of him. "You look like someone who needs a little hope," she had said with a gentle smile. When Ethan admitted he couldn't afford it, Emma simply replied, "Then promise me you'll come back one day after your dream comes true." That simple act of kindness had reminded Ethan not to give up. He never forgot her face, though life eventually carried them in different directions. Now he had discovered that the woman who had unknowingly saved his dream was Daniel's late wife. Determined to honor her memory, Ethan invited Daniel and Lily back to the mansion for dinner a few days later. Their visits soon became regular. The once silent halls echoed with Lily's laughter as she raced through the gardens or challenged Mr. Heiress to board games. Daniel helped with small repairs around the estate whenever he visited, refusing payment. For the first time since the accident, Ethan felt his house becoming a home again. But not everyone welcomed the change. Inside Carter Industries, several senior executives watched the growing friendship with suspicion. At the center of them was Victor Lang, the ambitious chief financial officer who had quietly gained influence since Ethan's accident. "If the CEO keeps listening to that delivery driver," Victor said during a private board meeting, "we'll lose control of every decision." Another executive frowned. "So what do we do?" Victor leaned back confidently. "We convince everyone that Daniel Brooks isn't a friend." Within days, rumors began spreading through the company. Employees whispered that Daniel was manipulating the lonely billionaire for money. Anonymous articles appeared online suggesting Ethan had become emotionally vulnerable and was being exploited by strangers. Reporters started waiting outside Daniel's modest home, asking whether he expected to inherit Ethan's fortune. Daniel was horrified. He had never wanted fame or wealth. He had only wanted to brighten a lonely man's birthday. That evening, he stood outside Carter Manor but couldn't bring himself to ring the bell. "If people think I'm hurting Ethan," he whispered to himself, "then staying away is the best thing I can do." He quietly turned around and walked back to his van. From an upstairs window, Ethan watched Daniel leave without knowing why. The mansion felt empty once again. Neither man realized they were both victims of the same cruel deception. But deep inside, Ethan sensed something wasn't right. For the first time in years, the brilliant businessman who had built a business empire began looking beyond the lies, and he was determined to uncover who was trying to destroy the only genuine friendship he had left. For nearly 2 weeks, Carter Manor fell silent once again. The cheerful laughter that had filled the halls disappeared. Lily no longer raced through the gardens, and Daniel's old delivery van was nowhere to be seen. Ethan spent his days attending board meetings and reviewing reports, but his thoughts constantly drifted back to the little family who had unexpectedly brought warmth into his lonely life. One afternoon, Mr. Heiress entered Ethan's office carrying a folder. "Sir," he said quietly, "I believe you should see this." Inside were copies of anonymous online articles accusing Daniel of using Ethan for financial gain. There were also photographs taken without permission, showing Daniel and Lily entering the mansion. Ethan's expression darkened. "I never approved any interviews." "You didn't," Mr. Heiress replied. "Neither did Mr. Brooks." Ethan immediately recognized the timing. The rumors had begun only after Daniel started visiting the mansion. Someone wanted to drive them apart. The businessman inside Ethan awakened. He called the company's head of security. "I want every source of these leaks investigated. Emails, phone records, media contacts, everything. I don't care how long it takes." Within days, the investigation uncovered disturbing evidence. Private company emails had been leaked directly to reporters. Anonymous payments had been made to gossip websites. The trail led to one person, Victor Lang, the chief financial officer. Victor had deliberately created the rumors to isolate Ethan, believing a lonely CEO would be easier to manipulate during an upcoming vote that would hand the board greater control over the company. Ethan felt both angry and disappointed. For years, he had trusted Victor with the business. Yet the man who delivered groceries had shown more loyalty than the executive sitting beside him in the boardroom. Without hesitation, Ethan drove his wheelchair into the company's emergency board meeting. Victor smiled confidently. "Good afternoon, Ethan." Ethan slid a thick file across the conference table. "Read it." Victor's smile slowly faded as he turned the pages. The room fell silent. Every email, every payment, every false article, every dishonest instruction, it was all documented. "You betrayed this company," Ethan said firmly. More importantly, you betrayed my trust. Security officers entered the room. Victor was immediately suspended while the remaining board members voted to remove him from his position pending legal action. That evening, Ethan asked Mr. Heiress to take him somewhere. Their car stopped outside Daniel's modest home. Daniel looked surprised to see the billionaire waiting at his front gate. I thought staying away would protect you, Daniel admitted quietly. Ethan shook his head. No. Your absence only proved how much your friendship meant. Daniel lowered his eyes. I didn't want people thinking I wanted your money. You never did, Ethan replied. That's exactly why I need your help. Daniel looked up. My help? I've spent years building successful companies, Ethan said. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to build a meaningful life. You and Lily reminded me what genuine kindness looks like. Lily ran out of the house before either man could say another word. Mr. Ethan. She threw her arms around him as carefully as she could. Ethan laughed, a deep, heartfelt laugh that surprised even himself. Looking at Daniel, he smiled. I have an idea, he said. Let's build something that isn't just profitable. Let's build something that changes lives. Daniel extended his hand. This time, he said, we'll do it together. As the two men shook hands beneath the evening sky, neither realized that their partnership would soon inspire thousands of people, and transform not only Ethan's company, but countless lives far beyond its walls. The partnership between Ethan Carter and Daniel Brooks quickly became the heart of a remarkable transformation. With Victor Lang suspended and the internal investigation continuing, Ethan regained full control of Carter Industries. But instead of focusing only on profits, he announced a bold new vision during the company's annual leadership conference. Standing before hundreds of employees in his wheelchair, Ethan spoke with a confidence they had not seen since before the accident. For years, he began, I believed success was measured by money, market value, and influence. I was wrong. A truly successful company changes lives, beginning with the people who work for it. The room erupted in applause. Soon afterward, Ethan launched the Emma Hope Foundation, named in honor of the woman whose simple act of kindness had inspired him years earlier. The foundation offered scholarships, business grants for disabled entrepreneurs, and emergency support for widowed and single parents struggling to rebuild their lives. When reporters asked why he had chosen the name, Ethan simply smiled. Because one person's kindness can create a future they never lived to see. Daniel accepted Ethan's offer to become the foundation's operations director. At first, he hesitated, worried that people would accuse him of receiving special treatment. You earned this, Ethan assured him. You don't know the language of boardrooms, but you understand people. That's something money can't buy. Daniel finally agreed, determined to honor Emma's memory through honest work. The foundation quickly became known across the country. Families who had once felt forgotten found hope again. Disabled veterans received funding to start businesses. Single parents received childcare assistance and job training. Every success story reminded Ethan why he had chosen a different path. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his physical rehabilitation with renewed determination. His therapists noticed the difference immediately. You've never worked this hard before, one of them remarked. I finally have something worth fighting for, Ethan replied. Months of relentless therapy slowly paid off. One afternoon, using parallel bars in the rehabilitation center, Ethan managed to stand for several seconds without assistance. The therapists applauded. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. For the first time since the accident, he believed that progress, not perfection, was the true victory. That evening, Daniel and Lily visited the mansion to celebrate. I heard the good news. Lily exclaimed as she ran inside carrying balloons. Ethan laughed. It wasn't much. It was everything, Daniel corrected. You stood on your own. After dinner, Lily disappeared into the kitchen and returned holding a small handmade gift wrapped in colorful paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly. Inside the package was a simple wooden picture frame she had painted herself. It held a photograph from Ethan's last birthday, the four of them gathered around her homemade chocolate cake, smiling as though they had known one another for years. Across the bottom, Lily had written in careful handwriting, "Family isn't always the people you're born with." Ethan stared at the words, overcome with emotion. Before he could speak, Lily wrapped her arms gently around him. "I don't have a grandpa anymore," she whispered. "Would it be okay if I called you Grandpa Ethan?" The room fell silent. Daniel looked nervous, unsure how Ethan would respond. Instead, tears rolled down Ethan's cheeks. He hugged Lily carefully. "I would be honored," he said, his voice trembling. In that quiet moment, Ethan realized the greatest birthday gift had never been the mansion, the company, or even the hope of walking again. It was finding the family he thought he had lost forever. 1 year passed faster than anyone expected. The lonely mansion that had once echoed with silence had become a place filled with laughter, music, and hope. The grand ballroom, where Ethan Carter had once waited alone for guests who never came, was once again decorated for his birthday. But this year, everything was different. Instead of expensive floral arrangements sent by wealthy executives trying to impress him, the room was decorated with handmade banners, colorful balloons, and hundreds of photographs showing the lives touched by the Emma Hope Foundation. Children's drawings covered one wall. Another displayed pictures of disabled entrepreneurs opening new businesses, widowed parents finding stable jobs, and families rebuilding their lives after receiving support from the foundation. Every photograph reminded Ethan that success was no longer measured by numbers on a financial report. It was measured by people. Guests began arriving long before sunset. Company employees came with their spouses and children. Foundation volunteers filled the gardens with cheerful conversation. Families who had received help traveled from across the country simply to say thank you. Many brought homemade gifts instead of expensive presents. Some baked cakes. Others knitted blankets. One young entrepreneur presented Ethan with a framed photograph of the first shop he had opened with the foundation's support. "This exists because you believed in me," the man said with tears in his eyes. Ethan accepted every gift with genuine gratitude. As the evening continued, Daniel Brooks stepped onto the small stage that had been set up in the ballroom. He smiled at the crowd. "Last year," he began, "my daughter and I knocked on this door carrying a tiny homemade chocolate cake because we thought no one should spend a birthday alone." Soft laughter spread through the room. "We had no idea that one small act of kindness would lead us here tonight." The audience applauded warmly. Daniel then looked toward Lily. "It's your turn." Now 9 years old, Lily walked onto the stage carrying another homemade chocolate cake. Just like the first one. The icing wasn't perfect. The writing leaned slightly to one side. But Ethan thought it was the most beautiful cake he had ever seen. She placed it gently in front of him. "Happy birthday, Grandpa Ethan." The room fell completely silent. Ethan looked around the ballroom. A year ago, he had stared at empty chairs, convinced that he had been forgotten by the world. Tonight, there wasn't a single empty seat. Every chair was filled by someone whose life had crossed his because of kindness. He slowly rose from his wheelchair, leaning on a walking stick. Months of rehabilitation had allowed him to stand for short periods, and the entire room watched with pride as he remained on his feet. Applause thundered through the ballroom. After taking a steady breath, Ethan smiled. "I used to believe that the greatest gift was wealth," he said. "Then I believed it was power. After my accident, I thought it would be walking again." He paused, looking at Daniel and Lily. "But I was wrong." His voice grew emotional. "The greatest gift I have ever received was a father and daughter who chose kindness over convenience. They didn't see a billionaire. They didn't see a man in a wheelchair. They simply saw someone who was lonely. Many guests wiped away tears. If you remember nothing else from my story, Ethan continued, remember this, one moment of compassion can change a life forever. Never underestimate the power of knocking on someone's door when everyone else walks away. The audience rose in a standing ovation. As music filled the ballroom, Ethan looked around at the people laughing, talking, and celebrating together. For the first time in many years, he realized he had everything he had ever truly wanted. Not a larger company. Not greater wealth. But a family built on love, loyalty, and compassion. And as Lily hugged him tightly before everyone sang, "Happy Birthday," Ethan knew that he would never spend another birthday alone.